World of Warcraft has seen some very dark times. Content droughts, design fiascos, scandals, systems too complex for their own good, and radio silence as community engagement hits an all-time low. And now Final Fantasy XIV and other competitors are closing in. But I don't think this has to be the end of the story for World of Warcraft. What World of Warcraft needs is simpler systems, more content, better community engagement so that the dev teams know what will get players excited to pick up World of Warcraft again. To that end, I have invented a system of my own, a simple system that gives players huge amounts of customization, that lets developers add awesome and useful abilities without fear of spellbar bloat, giving players the ability to upgrade 3 of their spells to be something new. I'm cooking up concepts for 7 of these upgrade spells for every spec. Some of them are returning favorites, some of them are brand new. Either way, Blizzard has my express permission to use every concept I post about in these videos in the comments or on the forums. And if the Blizzard developers are too pressed for time to engage with the community, then I will. I'll get the feedback on this concept, and even if they don't take a single one of my ideas, they'll know what the players want, and most importantly, why. And they can use that to make the game better, because I want this game better. I want WoW to last another decade. Rogues were actually the 5th class that I started cooking up upgrades for. At the time, I had a few upgrades already in mind, and I felt like I was finding my groove. I'll let you be the judge of whether I did in fact find my groove or not, and for that matter, the judge of whether the groove I found was a good groove or some kind of open sewer ditch. I know I'm going to make mistakes, especially with my first drafts. I started Project Decade knowing that, and with the full intention of iterating based on feedback as I go. A little fun fact. I knew that Assassination was all about poisons, and there was a Poison Nova ability from Diablo 2 that I thought was cool and deserved to be in World of Warcraft. That was actually part of my inspiration for the upgrade system in the first place, so I'll start with that upgrade. Poison Nova is an upgrade for Fan of Knives that deals nature damage over a wider area, deals more damage, and guarantees poison application but costs more energy. I'm toying with the idea of making it produce more combo points as well. On that note, the next upgrade is Chromatic Strike, an upgrade for Mutilate that infuses your weapons with the power of Shadow, Acid, or Flame. The damage that Chromatic Strike deals is not physical and bypasses armor, and the power lingers on your weapons, causing auto attacks to continue to deal 2% additional Shadow, Poison, or Fire damage for the next 15 seconds. Each elemental effect has its own duration. Next, we've got Deadly Throw, an upgrade for Envenom that deals nature damage, slows the target, and deals slightly more damage than Envenom would deal, and, you guessed it, is ranged. The 4th upgrade is Soul Bleed, an upgrade for Rupture that deals shadow damage over time but still counts as a bleed effect as far as your mastery is concerned. Using this ability prolongs the duration of Slice and Dice. 5th, we have... oh boy, this is going to require some explanation. Shadow Strike, which is an upgrade for Poisoned Knife. I went and renamed Shadow Strike in Subtleties Kit to Stealth Strike, and there is a logical explanation for that I will explain in the next section. The damage over time that you get from Shadow Strike, this version of it, counts as a poison as far as the mastery goes, and it lasts for a significant duration. The 6th upgrade is Marathon, which is an upgrade for Sprint that lasts longer and has a shorter cooldown, but you don't move as fast as Sprint moves. Finally, Dust Bomb, which is an upgrade for Vanish that grants stealth to you and to up to 2 nearby allies for up to 10 seconds. It's got a shorter cooldown than Vanish. Now for the thinking. Poison Nova was an ability shamelessly lifted from the Diablo series. I figured it'll look cool, even though slightly higher damage and wider reach are the only real benefits. Well, that and the fact that it's not physical damage and therefore ignores armor. I guess that perk is right there in the higher damage thing anyway. I figure it's going to be visually distinct and flavorful enough that it'll be an interesting addition to Assassination's repertoire. But in retrospect, should I have altered its feel further by making it generate 2 combo points instead of 1, or better yet, having it generate a number of combo points that depends on the number of targets hit. Chromatic strike was a concept that started as more visual than anything else, and it was actually the icons that gave me the idea. Imagine the blades on that icon having a rotating roster of orange and green, then green and purple, then purple and orange before cycling back to orange and green. Each time you use it, the colors rotate to the next configuration. They determine which buffs you get on your weapons, and each weapon has its own counter for how long each extra damage type lasts. Using the orange and green version charges your main hand weapon with fire damage for 15 seconds, and it charges your offhand weapon with acid for 15 seconds. The green and purple version charges your main hand weapon with acid for 15 seconds and your offhand weapon with shadow for 15. It's just another damage over time at the end of the day, albeit auto-attack flavored instead of debuff flavored. I figured it could look cool if your weapons streak colorfully through the air as they slice at your opponent when you use this. And looking cool is half the reason why I'm even creating the upgrade system. Though, if optimizing so that your weapons always have the elemental damage buffs is important, that means having at least 4 chromatic strikes within the duration. At first I had the duration as 10 seconds, but somehow that seemed like it might not be enough time, so I made it 15 instead. Of course, all of this is assuming that mixing in fire and shadow damage along with nature damage is anything like a good idea. If players don't actually like the fundamental concept, then, well, obviously it's going to go flying out the window. I'd like some idea of what to replace it with if that's the case. Now, the next paragraph was written at a time when I wasn't aware that Envenom literally replaced Eviscerate on your spell bar. And not just in that old ability isn't useful anymore so don't bother putting it on your spell bar kind of way either. I'm talking about literal, hey, I have Eviscerate bound to 3 and as soon as I pick Assassination it turns into Envenom. That kind of replacement. I had assumed that Envenom and Eviscerate were 2 separate abilities that could coexist in theory, if not in practice, on your spell bar, and I wrote the following. Deadly Throw is an older, pruned rogue ability from the Burning Crusade. Since Envenom is the main direct damage finisher for Assassination, Eviscerate seemed to be useless, and I like reinventing useless abilities that are still technically on your spell bar. So I gave it some utility and range by upgrading it to this. It's probably only going to be useful in a few situations, and I understand that. I'd say ignorance is bliss, but it doesn't seem like it at the moment. Anyhow, I have tweaked Deadly Throw so that it upgrades Envenom instead, and this version deals nature damage. It is a part of your rotation, and I wonder if having a slow as part of your rotation even makes sense. I am prepared to modify this further in response to feedback, but in my defense, Wowhead didn't actually tell me that Envenom replaces Eviscerate in so many words. To be honest, though, I've got this ability upgrading all 3 of Envenom, Dispatch, and Eviscerate, though Dispatch is a back pocket concept, and in the next iteration, unless feedback tells me to throw it out, I'll likely rename Assassination's version of Deadly Throw to something that sounds more poisony. Toxic Throw, Acid Spray, Orb of Venom, you get the idea. To be honest, I know Envenom is in a way a filler finisher. Keeping Rupture up is a higher priority, but making Envenom better, it's still a good thing to do. I like to take some utility abilities with each spec that I do this upgrade stuff with, and Sprint seemed like a solid choice. Marathon is meant to trade speed for duration, and when you run the numbers, it's also intended to let you cover more ground with Marathon than you could with Sprint, albeit not as quickly. I knew I needed to upgrade at least one finishing move that is part of the normal Assassin rotation. I'm using Icy Veins as a source to see just what that rotation is, and that meant Slice and Dice, Rupture, or Envenom. Yes, I wrote this paragraph while I still thought Envenom and Eviscerate were still 2 different abilities that could simultaneously be on your spell bar. But anyway, Rupture seemed like the right choice. At first, Soul Bleed was just a no-nuance shadow dot, but then I realized I need to give it a little something extra. So I had it refresh the duration of Slice and Dice the way Envenom does. I hope that's enough without being too much. It certainly isn't going to remove any one ability from the rotation to do that. Now for the explanation of why the heck I'm doing all this stuff with Shadow Strike. You see, Shadow Strike was an ability from Warcraft 3 that was absolutely nothing like the current Shadow Strike subtlety ability. Warcraft 3's version was a ranged damage over time that the Warden hero had. It was kind of a... shoot, how do you describe it? It put sort of a little cartoony, shadowy, ghosty, stabby thing above the target, and, it's hard to describe, but it looks cool. Not quite coincidentally, the Warden also gave us the Fan of Knives ability. But anyway, I'm admittedly obsessed with ranged damage abilities with no cooldown, and I often find myself upgrading those. It all comes from being a Holy Paladin and losing Denounce in Legion. Anyway, at one point I thought, since I don't see any poisons in Assassination's kit that are potent but intended to deal damage over a short duration, I'll give that a try. And then I realized it could be a bit more interesting if Shadow Strike dealt shadow damage over the long haul and was something you could periodically refresh if you pick it as an upgrade. Finally, Dust Bomb. I'm very much hoping it's not overpowered. Probably not, since it doesn't stealth your whole party, but I suspect it could save some bacon and some time in some circumstances. I also gave it a shorter cooldown to make it more appealing. I'll admit that it's another utility ability that I upgraded, again, because I was running low on ideas. I almost always start running low on ideas around 3 to 6 upgrades into this. And now that I think about it, I keep changing that number. Sometimes I say I run out of ideas 3 to 5 abilities in, sometimes 4 to 5. Now I'm picking the widest range. I suppose I run out of ideas at different times for different specs. Anyhow, one concept I'd kinda like to give to Assassination, but that doesn't really fit with the upgrade system, is a cooldown called Melphitic Grenade. It deals a burst of nature damage to a target and to enemies near the target, but it also spreads all bleed and poison effects on the main target to nearby enemies. The reason behind this is I had read that Assassination could use a multi-target cooldown, but I couldn't think how to put this into the upgrade system. Would Melphitic Grenade be best as a talent? And if so, which talent should it take the place of? Or should Melphitic Grenade be a new baseline assassin skill? Should I make it so that it's an upgrade to Vendetta so that you can choose between having a multi-target cooldown or a single-target cooldown on your spell bar? And if so, which other upgrade should I boot out to make room for it? Or, heck, none of the above? Please let me know what you think of all this. Now, when I started out with these upgrade concepts, I went ability by ability, not purpose by purpose, if you see what I mean. I asked myself, which abilities exist in this specs kit that I can give an upgrade to? And when I created upgrades based on which abilities I could upgrade, I often aimed for something that I thought looked or sounded cool. Almost always I wanted the upgraded ability to feel at least a little bit different from the original. Often I tried to create some kind of trade-off, making the upgrade situationally useful based on things like the number of targets affected or having a stronger effect with a longer cooldown, things like that. Rarely did I upgrade the same ability more than once for the same spec, but while I was putting together each spread of upgrades, what I didn't do, and what I probably should have done in retrospect, was to figure out what goals a player would have while they're looking at a list of upgrades, and then make sure upgrades exist in the spread that allow the player to pick upgrades that help them achieve those goals. In my next iteration, I plan to have that design goal in mind, to consider what the player wants to accomplish and how they could accomplish it with the upgrades. I strongly suspect that in this next iteration, there will be a lot more cases where I upgrade the same ability in 2 or more different ways. That will give players more options, and since that's going to be the goal with goal-oriented design, who knows? I might even have 3 different upgrades for the same ability in the end. However, I can do this much more effectively in an environment that has a great deal of feedback available, and that's where you come in. You have knowledge that comes from experience with these specs. I don't. I tried to do my research on Wowhead and Icy Veins for each spec, but inevitably there'll be things you know that I don't because you have experience that I don't have. You'll have more and better ideas than I could hope to have, and I know I need those, so please, let me know what you think of these upgrades and what better ideas you have for what to put in their places. Now let's examine how I did with this upgrade spread in terms of accomplishing a goal. If an Assassin Rogue player wanted to optimize for, say, multi-target damage, how could they do so? Well, there's only one actual multi-target upgrade in this whole spread, Poison Nova. In retrospect, maybe I should have taken the Deadly Throw upgrade and made it a multi-target ability. At least that would have made it feel different and function differently. Maybe I should have taken that Malphitic Grenade concept and used that name here. I mean, then there's no multi-target cooldown, but at least you got something for multi-target damage. I guess one of the reasons why I don't have much along the lines of multi-target upgrades here is because Assassination rogues don't have that many multi-target abilities to start with. Though that didn't stop me from adding a bunch of multi-target upgrades for feral druids, which makes me a little bit ashamed of my first iteration for Assassination. I suppose I could have also upgraded Poison Knife and made it into a multi-target Shadow Dot just so that there's a nice third slot that can upgrade multi-target damage. But I also need to see how I did for single-target damage. Well, there's Shadow Strike, Shadow Bleed, Deadly Throw, and Chromatic Strike. That's 4, and there are only 3 slots for upgrades to be equipped in, so I think it's safe to say I can take one of these single-target upgrades out and make it a multi-target buff instead. I mean, there are other specs for whom I have 4 upgrades that help with the same purpose, but generally those are different in terms of burst versus sustain, so each of the 4 upgrades has their place. All 4 of these look like sustain upgrades, so what I'm thinking tentatively is changing Shadow Strike to Mass Shadow Strike, so it can add damage over time to multiple targets with a long-term Shadow Dot, and then Deadly Throw becomes... Wait, I was going to give Deadly Throw a multi-target component, but the Poison Bomb talent kind of already does that, though if I changed it to, say, Orb of Venom and had it damage multiple enemies, that would just mean multiple acid pools. Would that be a non-broken way for the Poison Bomb talent and the multi-target upgrade for Envenom to interact? And if I add a multi-target finisher via the upgrade system, what does that mean for the Crimson Tempest talent? Would having both simply mean Crimson Tempest takes priority and Orb of Venom is the filler finisher in between Crimson Tempests? Kind of like how Envenom is the filler finisher between Rupture finishers? Feedback would be appreciated here. I've been very open and stream of consciousness-y about what I'm thinking and why, because I know I'm not an expert. Assassination isn't a spec I've actually tried, and while I make every effort to do my homework on Wowhead and Icy Veins, there are still things that I could have missed. For example, that Envenom and Eviscerate can't both be on your spell bar at the same time. And I know I'll make more mistakes, so I figure the more I show about what I was thinking and why, the easier it'll be for you to point out where I went wrong and why. What I was missing specifically. So please do leave feedback about what you think of this iteration and what I'm proposing to do in the next iteration with Mass Shadow Strike and multi-target upgrades for Envenom. Not to mention the naming. Orb of Venom is a Night Elf item from Warcraft 3, and I kinda like it. Throw an orb, multi-target nature damage, leave an acid pool or 3, and if you have the Poison Bomb talent, let me know what you think. Of course, I know Blizzard probably won't take many, or even any of these suggestions. Heck, they might even have something objectively better in store for us than the semi-borrowed power upgrade system that I've cooked up here. But knowing what gets players excited will be helpful to them even so. That is why I'm sacrificing so much of my free time and energy on Project Decade. And who knows, they might just need these ideas to get WoW going in the right direction. Heck, if this video series just gets the Blizzard developers into the habit of creating a blue post with the thinking in it that goes in-depth enough for us to understand what they're doing and what their design goals are, then that would be a huge step forward. Even saying the thinking out loud is sometimes enough to get you a new perspective on what you're doing. Is it really what people want? Does it serve the purposes that it really should be serving in the end? Am I really doing something just to make a system look awesome instead of making the game overall better? What does it do for the fun factor? Am I making the mistake of prioritizing my design goals over the fun factor? Are my design goals the right design goals to have? Do my ideas match the spec's feel and flavor? Is it a net gain? Is it genuinely awesome? Things like that. Plus, we just plain need more communication from Blizzard. If Project Decade gets the development team into the habit of telling us the thinking for every change they make, then the whole project will have been worth it, even if they don't take a single suggestion. Again, if you see something you don't like, like bad trade-offs or something you know is counterproductive or useless, or if you've thought of an idea that's better or cooler or more useful than mine, then don't hesitate to let me know. The more details you can provide about why you don't like it and what makes one of my ideas counterproductive or useless, or about why your idea is cooler or more useful than mine, the better. One of the main goals of Project Decade is to give whoever's in charge of class design and player power systems a good idea what appeals to players and what will actually get them excited to get back to WoW again. And the more you can say about the wherefore and the why, the better. I fully intend to iterate on this project and make changes in response to feedback. I know I'm going to make mistakes. Heck, I've already seen mistakes in some of the things that I've done. But if those mistakes generate the kind of discussion that Blizzard needs to hear, so much the better. Blizzard needs to see player engagement, humility, and feedback actually making change in action so they can start doing what needs to be done to turn WoW around. It can be done and it should be done. World of Warcraft can last another decade. So keep the feedback coming, folks. There's one last thing. I began working on Project Decade videos back in July, and considering how many months it has taken, the fact that there are 36 different sets of feedback to curate and compile, and multitudes of decisions to make based on feedback received, ideas others have come up with, and how to weave everything together into a fun, functional, and exciting whole, I don't have a chance in the tramaculum of getting this done in any reasonable length of time unless I get volunteers to help me curate and compile the feedback I'm getting. If you're willing to help curate feedback, please let me know. If I get enough interest, I will set up a Discord server where we can coordinate everything. Thank you in advance for your feedback and support. Let's make World of Warcraft the best game that it can be.